Mind language in the midst of time changes. The world feels impatient and anxious, eagerly awaiting a break from daily stresses, determined not to change their thought processes. They go from the young and the restless to the growth just oppressed us. Souls dying in anger, children become victims to danger, divided by the population, and there's still a remainder of guilty bystanders, guilty by standing around and doing nothing. Half of the time they making excuses or something. The other half of the time the people end up following behind what we know to be incorrect, electing to be politically correct. That just makes you suspect, a susceptible threat to moral concepts, confusing common senses with godly defenses, straddling the fences between freedom and religion. But how can one be free if he bears the curse of iniquity? And how could religion save the ones that refuse to behave? So there's a need for a change, a rebellion in the mind, a failure to define perfect obedience to biblical guidelines. You can't hide behind the ignorance of being blind. You can argue with yourself about being good most of the time. Praise is a crime. Read Proverbs chapter 29. We've absorbed more than enough of our mothers crying from witnessing their sons trying to follow behind their father's footsteps when his footsteps led to a spiritual loss of breath, and our daughters wept because their brothers and fathers sinned to death. There's an end to this, but it begins with this, a restoration of mental language, our thoughts renewed and blameless. As we imprint truth on the canvas of our conscience, then we begin to accomplish everything that was meant to be, and that is what mind language means to me. This is the story of two foolish neighbors, envy and pride. Envy coveted everything pride had, everything he occupied. The more she saw pride's lifestyle rise, envy grew all the more angry inside. Pride was arrogant and could care less about envy's stress. He had too high of an opinion of himself, materialistic things and earthly wealth. Even when burdened with life troubles, he was too proud to seek God's help. Envy was upset because pride expressed no kind of respect. Pride told envy,
I'm not stooping down to speak to a mere peasant.
Well, it's time, Mr. Pride, that you learn a lesson.
Oh, really?
Pride replied, yet he showed no humility, and said,
Are you jealous of me? Jealous of who I have come to be? Everything I have acquired, I worked hard for it at every opportunity.
Envy laughed out loud and said with a grin,
Everything you own came from your agreement with Satan.
Distressed and astonished, Pride then vulgarly responded,
Envy, you are nothing more than a crab wanting all that I have, trying to pull me back to insult my intelligence.
All this talk is irrelevant. Neither one of us are gonna see the gates of heaven.
Pride then realized that what Envy said was very true. He looked at Envy and cried out.
What are we to do?
Envy, still bitter about the dispute, said,
I don't know about you, but I am satisfied with whom I am, because I am not a prideful man.
How ignorant you are, Envy, to pass judgment on my sins, as if to say that being an envious fool puts you in a better position.
Pride continued to speak.
We are both emotions of the flesh, both condemned nonetheless, yet we argue over who's the best.
Pride then said, all teary-eyed,
Go ahead, Envy, with your homicide, if you think your life is better than mine.
Envy stood reluctant to speak, focused on Pride. She wouldn't blink, contemplating their fate as they both stood in the street.
I've allowed Satan to seduce and make a fool out of me. How ignorant can I be?
She turned and said,
I just got to get out of here. You are no good for me.
Where you going? You can't just disappear. If it's gonna be like that, then I'm gonna walk away too. I don't need you.
It's a shame what envy and pride will make you do when you don't follow the Lord through spirit and the truth. I speak. Give me a social conscience so I can be socially honest. I never write for popularity. That I can definitely promise. Lights on or lights off, I still deliver truth with force, using metaphors, of course, to offer understanding through my voice. My success is not based off the economics of dollars and cents. You can gain many riches and still feel a certain amount of emptiness. If it makes any sense, my prosperity is in this gift to spiritually uplift. That's why I can't identify with this commotion about the physical cliff. Making in God we trust a myth if we worship wealth as an experience. See, the physical man inherits this, and all his treasures will perish. We have to set up our lives building our treasures up in heaven. No judgment towards this government. We pray for their benevolence. That with their earthly power they do that which is morally correct. Egos need to be put in check if we are to reinvest in integrity and respect. I believe in the Most High and His vision. That's why I accept the circumcision. Should I be judged because I don't follow religion or belong to a church building? I love my neighbor as myself. I try to follow this with good intentions. But because I refuse to be commercialized, some laugh at my decisions. Even with that, I pray for forgiveness toward any that I may offended. It's not just my words that represent, but my actions support the message I'm sending. I don't want to blend in just to fit in. I can't keep quiet to stop the riot. I once tried to walk away, but God said, "These are not your words. They are inspired." See, many of us are mere vessels for the message that must be articulated, demonstrated, and propagated, regardless of ignorance and hatred. That's why these times seem hard for all of us, because Satan is agitated. He knows his time is running out. He's just trying to make our lives complicated. Armed with this knowledge, we should no longer be intimidated. Open up your mouth and say, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Speak. Broken vessel. I have become like a broken vessel, smashed on every side, entangled with worldly affairs. I was barely kept alive. You see, I was stolen from God's holy sanctuary, but not against my will. I wandered freely into the wilderness, attracted by its appeal. I craved its delicacies and formed habits that got the best of me. Before I knew it, I was polluted by this world's vanities. Partaking in the fruits of knowledge of good and evil, I became a chief sinner among the people, far from the purpose of which the master potter had created for me. But you know how we think, that we know what's best for us. Until we experience the pains of lust, then we return to God asking Him to free us. Because I can't continue to use my vessels for purpose that it was not intended it to be. The cracks were mere apparent from the wear and tear sin had on me. I wanted to return to my place in the sanctuary, where I no longer had to worry, and my sins could be buried. And I could rise from the dust with a new birth. And while the residue of these old cracks remain, my vessel has been changed. When man thought I was useless, thought I was good for nothing, God picked me up and patched me up and made me worth something.
Just giving. Sometimes we take waking up for granted. I know we make plans to There's nothing wrong with making plans for the future, but in those plans, without God in that plan, is no plan at all.
That's right, sir.
So sometimes we take it for granted when we wake up in the morning, and whether we get to go to work, whether we're off that day, whether we're with the kids, without the kids, it's just a blessing to wake up. And you didn't wake up on your own. It was God that said, you know, I got some more things for you to do today. So this poem was inspired by the goodness of waking up to the morning. It says, some call it AM. I call it thank him. Thanking him for the morning I am awake again. Awake from sin and yesterday's transgressions. Ready for today's blessings. Ready for today's lessons. At the first glimpse of sunlight during the beautiful makings of dawn, just before your very first yawn, a new day has magnificently begun. A day to be compared to no other. A day that God has uniquely created. Yesterday's problems and issues will not go away with ease. No matter how difficult things are, they are not always as bad as they seem. We can only deal with one thing at a time. That's the best way to handle it. For today starts a joyous day, made to fulfill your promise. Although the troubles may follow, they shall not stop my tomorrow. So in these early moments of AM, I meditate on my peace. You see, some call it AM, but I call it thank him. Thanking him for the morning I awake again. Awake from sin and yesterday's transgressions, ready for today's blessings, ready for today's lessons. I am thankful for this life and all that God has given me. My blessings are my blessings, the strength beneath my feet. And though the world around me seems shaky, I will not accept defeat. I will rise with righteous pride, for I am surely glorified. I can speak a prayer of confidence. I will no doubt survive. Morning presents to us a new day that we are to truly be restored. I may be homeless, jobless, sick, or poor, but in God's eyes, I will not be ignored. His words does not go out void. Throughout the night, our prayers are heard. Those things that we desire the most were being manifested by Yah's word. We ought to owe nothing but love, and we receive what we deserve. Some call it AM, but I call it thank him. Thanking him for the moment that I am awake again. Awake from sin and yesterday's transgressions. Ready for today's blessings. Ready for today's lessons. Sometimes we have to carefully watch and observe, being aware how we speak. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen twice as much as we speak. Be thankful for true and sincere friends and unconditional love from family. All of those thoughts while we spend those last few minutes in bed, thinking about all that has to be done in the day that lies ahead. If we begin with it is well and have faith that his will be done, we can awake and lay all our burdens at the feet of the anointed Son. For we are sure to face trials that draw us closer to our Heavenly Father, who is the author and finisher of our faith. He is the only way of escape. So let today be the day that we rejoice with infinite praise. Forgive those who have hurt us and ask him for forgiveness in return. Life's tribulations serve as lessons that we ought to seek to learn. Refreshed and rejuvenated, I greet the delight of the rising of the sun. It's morning, a day that Yah has made. I am alive to live another one. All right. So that